It's not often that I get to talk to a pilot who has survived a mid-air collision, but yesterday I had a phone conversation with the instructor pilot in the right seat of the Civil Air Patrol Cessna 206 aircraft that suffered a fatal mid-air collision in the traffic pattern at Minden, Nevada. The aircraft that was struck was a 1946 Globe Swift. The red material you see on the wings and engine of the aircraft is 5606 hydraulic fluid. The 1946 Globe Swift has a small hydraulic system to power the landing gear, the retractable landing gear, and the flaps. My name is Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and here's what I found out. This content is brought to you by the folks that support this channel here on Patreon. Thank you for your support. Starting with the Aviation Safety Network on Monday, 16 September, 9:46 local time, Globe GC-1B Swift. More information on that shortly. November 78074, a 1946 model. There was one pilot on board that Swift, and he was fatally injured. The Globe Swift and a Civil Air Patrol Cessna 206 Turbo Stationair, November 844 Charlie Papa, collided in midair near the Minden Tahoe Airport, Minden, Nevada. The Globe Swift crashed into a field off of Highway 395 near Johnson Lane, and the sole pilot perished and the aircraft was destroyed. The Cessna landed safely at the airport following the mid-air collision. The Minden Airport is located just east of Lake Tahoe here in the state of Nevada and has two separate runways. It is a uncontrolled airport with a CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory frequency, of 123.05, and there are four separate runways total at Minden Tahoe Airport. Located in the flat basin just east of the Sierra Mountains, here on Google Maps you can see the two active runways. This runway has since been deactivated and is now just a series of taxiways. The active runway at the time of the mid-air collision was runway 34. The Cessna 206 was able to do an emergency landing here on runway 12. And the wreckage of the Globe Swift was located here near 395 and Johnson Lane. Just to the southeast of the Minden Airport is the private Pine Nut Airport, and this is where it's believed that the pilot of the Globe Swift was coming from before entering the pattern here at Minden. Here's a picture of the Globe Swift involved in the fatal midair, November 78074. The name of the pilot has been released. It is Swift owner and Swift guru, if you will, Don Bartholomew, who has been building and rebuilding Swift aircraft for many, many years, primarily out of his facility there at the Pine Nut Airport just to the southeast of Minden. The Cessna 206 was on a check ride flight with an instructor pilot in the right seat and another pilot in the left seat getting his check ride. The Civil Air Patrol is an all-volunteer auxiliary of the United States Air Force and has been around since 1941 and helps primarily with search and air rescue missions. The Civil Air Patrol aircraft was doing its mandatory 12-month check ride for the pilot in the left seat and was entering the pattern, or had entered the pattern, for a series of touch-and-go landings when the accident occurred. So it looks like the 206 initially entered the pattern on a straight-in, I assume, instrument approach, flew a downwind base and final to a touch and go, and then turned crosswind, with the accident occurring right at the turn from crosswind to downwind when they impacted the Globe Swift. In a phone interview with the instructor pilot in the right seat of the Civil Air Patrol 206, the crew of the 206 was just beginning their turn from crosswind to downwind when they heard on the radio, the first radio call from the Globe Swift, something along the lines of entering the downwind on the 45, runway 34, Minden, Nevada. That got their attention, as that was about the same location that they were at, or are going to be at very shortly. And so they searched frantically around outside of the aircraft to try to find this Globe Swift. They looked briefly at their panel at the ADSB data and saw no ADSB data of another aircraft in the traffic pattern. And as they continued their turn to downwind, they never saw the Globe Swift until they impacted the Globe Swift. Once they impacted the Swift, the 206 began shaking violently, and you can see from the picture one of the 3 prop blades is missing from the engine. So the engine was so far out of balance that it violently shook itself loose from the mounts and then subsequently failed. The pilot in the left seat exclaimed, "What was that?" The instructor pilot in the right seat said, "I have the aircraft," and took control of the aircraft. Now, as soon as they impacted, not only did the engine shake and break loose from its mounts, or begin to break loose from its mounts, it remained attached to the aircraft, but the cowling popped open. The top half of the cowling flew up, blocking the view of the pilot. However, remember on the Cessnas, they got the little access door, or the oil access door. That door was open, and the pilot was able to see through that access door, until which time that the entire cowling eventually flew off the aircraft, opening up the view for the pilot. Of course, the pilot was able to see out of the left window as well, left and right windows. But once the cowling peeled away from the aircraft, the windshield was covered with the hydraulic fluid from the Globe Swift. But the instructor pilot in the right seat just instinctively lowered the nose and flew the aircraft right into a straight-in dead-stick approach for runway 12, which was conveniently lined up with their present location. They were able to bring the aircraft to a full stop. Once they got the aircraft to a full stop, using a handheld radio, which they normally carry with them, they then made a Mayday call once they were on the ground to make sure that emergency responders were responding to the other aircraft. Another pilot, a retired airline pilot, was driving up 395 and witnessed the impact of the collision. He was not able to tell, also in a phone interview, he was not able to tell from which direction did the Swift come from, but he caught the flash of the collision and the Swift spiraling down out of the sky in a counterclockwise fashion on fire. So there was an onboard fire on board the Swift after impact with the 206, but prior to ground impact. So investigators are going to need to determine, well, from what direction was the Swift coming from? How did they impact each other? And by looking at the forensic review of the wreckage, they should be able to figure it out. But it looks like here on the engine is displaced to the right. So it looks as if the Swift and the 206 came together from the left side, if this is the 206 here, from the left side of the 206, which is just the opposite side of where the aircraft should be if he was truly on a 45-degree entry for runway 34. Because a 45-degree entry for runway 34 would put the Swift over here on the right side of the 206, and that's primarily where the Cessna 206 crew was looking, was for aircraft off to their right. But the Pine Knot Airport, where the pilot of the Swift is based out of, is located down here, and so they're currently speculating or wondering or trying to figure out, did the Swift just fly directly from his airport and enter the pattern in an odd fashion here for runway 34 at the Minden Tahoe Airport? Another consideration is the classic high wing versus low wing conflict. If this is the Cessna 206 high wing aircraft, and this is the Globe Swift, the low wing aircraft, and if the Swift is approaching from the left of the 206 is in a climbing left turn to finish off his downwind entry, and if the Swift was descending into a left crosswind entry for runway 34, that would expose the belly of the Swift to the 206. The Swift pilot would never see the 206, and with the high wing of the Cessna, that would have limited his ability to see the Globe Swift as well until it was too late. Now, a little bit more about the Globe Swift and its owner. The Globe Swift, the 1946 Globe Swift, commonly referred to as the poor man's P-51, is a unique design from the 1940s, a low-wing, tail-dragger, retractable gear, fairly high-performance, small, light sport aircraft. Now, over the years, originally these aircraft were powered by the 0300 Continental engine, 145 horsepower, but over the years they were modified with slightly larger engines. And the victim in the Midair collision, Don Bartholomew, was well known and well respected throughout the entire Swift community, as he was the guy that held many of the STCs, or supplemental type certificates, that allowed this whole entire fleet of aircraft to remain airworthy all these years. He was able to supply the parts and the STCs to improve upon these designs, including increasing the power on these engines. So this is a picture of Don's aircraft, the one involved in the accident. And right away you can see that he's got the larger engine with the fiberglass cowling on it. He had a 0320 or 150 horse Lycoming engine. Very common STC is to take the 0360 180 horse engine and install them on these Swift aircraft, two-seat side-by-side. One of the other many modifications he adds to them, or does to them, is this canopy, one-piece sliding canopy, and replace the yokes, the original yokes on the Swift, with sticks, making it a much more sportier light aircraft. And sadly, Don was ferrying this moving this aircraft over to his hangar in Minden to get ready for this weekend's Swift fly-in, which is about to occur. Well, it's going on right now in Jackson, California. Each year, the Swift Type Club gets together to socialize and compare notes on these rare and really neat small aircraft right here in Jackson, California. Now, it's widely believed that Don did have ADSB capability on his Swift, but he elected to, and it was commonly known by his friends, his close friends, that Don did not like the concept of ADSB. He didn't like the concept of the FAA knowing his every move, and so he had a switch, like is common to many of these ADSB out programs. If they're wired to your nav lights, all you got to do is switch the nav lights off and your ADSB is off. But Don often flew intentionally with the ADSB technology off. And this will definitely be a contributing factor in this accident. Because this is an uncontrolled airport on a common traffic advisory frequency, there's no requirement to record these radio transmissions. So it's going to be up to investigators. Without the ADSB data, it's going to be up to eyewitnesses and ear witnesses and those that can best help investigators try to determine from which direction the Swift was coming from at the time of the midair collision. And everybody that I've talked to has so far been very cooperative in talking with the NTSB and the FAA on what's happened here. But this accident once again reminds us of the very large limitations of visually seeing and avoid other aircraft, especially in the traffic pattern. Like most midair collisions, it happened under perfectly clear conditions, perfectly good weather, and within a couple of miles of the airport in the traffic pattern. Advisory circular from the FAA 90-66 Charlie, dated 6/6 of 23, reminds all of us once again of the proper protocol and procedures of pattern procedures at uncontrolled airports, or non-tower airports, if you will, as well as proper radio communications procedures at these uncontrolled airports. And all of this information is well worth a separate update unto itself. This accident also reminds us to continue to fly the aircraft all the way into the full stop. So thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. We'll dive into this in a separate update. Thank you so much for your support. See you here.